Imagine sitting at a table dripping with wealth, crystal chandeliers, wine older than your car, and a family who looks at you like you're the hired help. That's Nora Callahan's reality. Every month she walks into her father's Lake Oswego estate, where the air smells of cedar and smug superiority, wearing jeans and a faded flannel while her relatives flash Rolexes and Hermes bags. They think she's a failure, scraping by in a rundown rental at Willow Grove, driving a beat-up Jeep. But here's the twist they don't see coming. Nora isn't just surviving. She's the mastermind behind Apex Holdings, a real estate firm quietly reshaping Oregon's housing landscape. While they sip $500 Pinot and laugh at her simple life, she's already outplayed them, owning the very complex they mock. This is the story of a woman who turned her family's disdain into her sharpest weapon. And trust me, you'll want to see how she flips their world upside down. Hit that like button, drop a comment if you've ever been underestimated, and subscribe for the full saga, because Nora's just getting started. The Callahan estate sprawled across a manicured hill, its floor-to-ceiling windows framing Mount Hood like a private painting. Nora stepped through the mahogany doors, her boots scuffing softly against marble floors, a deliberate contrast to the heels clicking around her. The monthly family dinners were less about food and more about power, each Callahan posturing like they were auditioning for a Forbes cover. Her father, Gideon, sat at the head of a polished walnut table, his tailored suit crisp as a dollar bill. Her sister, Marlo, swept in late, her oversized Fendi bag swinging like a trophy, her smile as sharp as her stilettos. Cousin Soren, reeking of oud cologne, checked his Patek Philippe watch, smirking as if time itself owed him interest. They were the Callahans, old money, new schemes, and zero patience for Nora's modest existence. "Still at Willow Grove, Nora?" Marlo asked, her voice loud enough to turn heads, including the butlers. "I swear that place looks like it's one storm away from collapsing." Soren chuckled, swirling his wine. "You still driving that Jeep? I thought you'd at least upgrade to something with less rust." Nora smiled, her hands steady as she poured herself water. "It gets me where I need to go." Gideon barely glanced up, his fork poised over a sliver of Wagyu. "Let's move on," he said, but the room's energy had already shifted, the Callahans circling like sharks smelling blood. They loved this game, poking at Nora's life to prop up their own egos. What they didn't know was that Willow Grove, the brick and ivy complex they sneered at, wasn't just her home. Nora had bought it 6 years ago through Apex Holdings, her company hidden behind layers of LLCs and silent partners. While they bragged about ski chalets in Sun Valley and shell companies in the Caymans, Nora was preserving affordable housing for families who'd otherwise be priced out. Every jab they threw, about her renting, her clothes, her failure to climb their ladder, was a brick in the wall she'd built to keep them clueless. She wasn't here to play their game. She was rewriting the rules. Gideon launched into his usual sermon about legacy, his voice carrying the weight of a man who thought he owned the horizon. Marlo boasted about her PR firm's latest deal with a boutique hotel chain, conveniently leaving out the inflated invoices she'd slipped through. Soren droned on about a strategic vineyard purchase in Napa, funded by questionable loans. Nora stayed quiet, cutting her salmon, letting their voices bounce off the chandelier. They didn't ask about her work and she didn't offer. Why spoil the surprise? She knew something they didn't. A storm was brewing, and it wasn't the kind that would take down Willow Grove. It was the kind that would shake their empire to its foundation. As dessert arrived, some gold-flecked confection nobody needed, Marlo leaned forward, her eyes glinting with mock pity. "Nora, seriously, when are you going to buy something? Renting at your age? It's sad." The table went quiet, waiting for Nora's flinch. She didn't give them one. "I like where I live," she said, her voice calm as a frozen lake. Soren snorted. "That place? I bet the pipes scream louder than the tenants." Nora sipped her water, her pulse steady. They thought they were winning, but every word they spoke was another nail in their own coffin. She wasn't just sitting at their table. She was biding her time, and the clock was ticking louder than they could hear. The chandelier above the Callahans' walnut table glittered like a crown, casting light on a family drunk on their own myth. Nora Callahan sat quietly, her flannel sleeves rolled to her elbows, while her father Gideon, sister Marlo, and cousin Soren turned their monthly dinner into a stage for self-congratulation. The Lake Oswego estate hummed with their boasts. Gideon's latest legacy deal to flip a coastal property, Marlowe's PR firm securing a cushy contract with a luxury hotel chain, Soren's vineyard venture in Napa that screamed money laundering more than Merlot. Each word dripped with the assumption that they were untouchable, their wealth a fortress Nora could never breach. They didn't just underestimate her. They dismissed her entirely, mocking her rental life at Willow Grove as if it were a punchline. But Nora wasn't laughing. Beneath her calm exterior she was a coiled spring, and the secret she held, her ownership of Willow Grove, was about to make their smugness taste like ash. Marlowe leaned across the table, her diamond bracelet catching the light. "Nora, I drove past Willow Grove last week," she said, her tone syrupy with condescension. "Those chain-link gates? That crumbling brick? You're not scared someone's gonna steal your thrift store couch?" Soren barked a laugh, his cologne clouding the air. "No couch is safe in that dump. You still got that Jeep, Nora? Or did it finally die?" Nora's fork paused over her plate, but her eyes stayed steady. "It runs fine," she said, her voice a quiet blade. The butler, hovering near the wine decanter, stifled a smirk. Gideon, at the head of the table, didn't look up, but his silence was its own judgment. To him, Nora's presence was a courtesy, not a necessity. What they didn't know, what they couldn't even imagine, was that Willow Grove, the complex they ridiculed, was Nora's first conquest. 6 years ago she'd bought the entire block through Apex Holdings, her real estate firm, cloaked in a web of LLCs that kept her name invisible. While Marlowe billed spa retreats as client meetings, and Soren funneled cash through fake contractors, Nora was preserving homes for families, veterans, and retirees who'd been priced out of Portland's skyrocketing market. Willow Grove's ivy-covered walls and iron balconies weren't crumbling. They were solid, a testament to her quiet war against greed. Every jab her family threw was a misstep, a clue they were blind to the empire she'd built under their noses. Gideon cleared his throat, redirecting the conversation to his latest triumph. A historic lighthouse he'd bought to turn into a private club. "It's about legacy," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of a man who thought he owned the future. Marlowe jumped in, bragging about her firm's 5-year deal with a hotel chain, conveniently glossing over the $50,000 in consulting fees she'd pocketed for a single lunch. Soren, not to be outdone, described his vineyard as a game-changer, ignoring the fact that its funding came from a questionable loan tied to Callahan Ventures. Nora sipped her water, letting their voices fill the room like smoke. She didn't need to speak. Her silence was her shield, and their arrogance was her ammunition. As the meal wound down, Marlowe couldn't resist one last dig. "Nora, you're 35? Still renting at Willow Grove? You know they're tearing that place down soon, right? Some developer's turning it into condos." She smiled, expecting Nora to shrink. Instead, Nora set her napkin down, her movements deliberate. "I've read the lease," she said, her tone so even it sent a chill through the room. Soren leaned forward, smirking. "You're gonna need a new address when the bulldozers show up." Nora's eyes met his, unflinching. "I'll manage." The table went quiet, but not because they sensed her power. They thought they'd won another round, oblivious to the fact that Nora wasn't just playing their game. She was rewriting the board. And the real shock? The developer Marlowe mentioned? That was Nora through Apex, and she wasn't tearing anything down. She was building something they'd never understand. The dinner ended with Gideon raising a glass to family success, his gaze skipping over Nora like she was a footnote. She stood, nodded politely, and left the estate, her Jeep's engine rumbling as she drove back to Willow Grove. In the rearview mirror, the mansion's lights faded, but the fire in her chest burned brighter. They thought they knew her story. Poor Nora, stuck in a rental too small for their world. They had no idea she was already holding the keys to theirs, and the lock was about to turn. Nora Callahan's Jeep rolled through the quiet streets of Portland, the city lights flickering like secrets she'd learned to keep. Back at Willow Grove, her supposed rental complex, the courtyard glowed under soft solar lamps, where tenants grew basil in mismatched pots and debated mailbox repairs like it was high-stakes poker. To her family, this was a crumbling relic, a punchline for their polished egos. To Nora, it was the cornerstone of Apex Holdings, her real estate empire built in the shadows of her family's greed. A former Marine, she traded desert camouflage for corporate stealth, acquiring properties like Willow Grove while her father Gideon, sister Marlowe, and cousin Soren coasted on fake invoices and inflated egos. Every dinner at the Callahan estate sharpened her resolve. their mockery fueling her silent mission to outmaneuver them. But the game was about to escalate, and Nora was ready to move pieces they didn't even know were on the board. Willow Grove wasn't just a home, it was Nora's first victory. 6 years ago, fresh from a shoulder injury and VA appointments, she'd bought the block under Apex Holdings, a name that never traced back to her. The red brick building with its iron balconies and stubborn ivy housed families, retirees, and veterans like herself, people her family would have priced out without a second thought. While Marlo bragged about her PR firm's latest brand synergy deal and Soren funneled Callahan Ventures cash into a shady Napa vineyard, Nora was securing grants to retrofit Willow Grove with solar panels and seismic upgrades. She kept rents low, even lowering them for 2 families with a veterans grant she'd fought for. Her family saw a rundown complex. Nora saw a community worth saving. Back in her apartment, Nora opened her laptop, the glow illuminating her small kitchen. The dashboard for Apex Holdings showed 4 other properties. None flashy, all profitable, all protected by local preservation laws. She'd built Apex in her spare bedroom, fueled by painkillers and purpose, learning to move money as quietly as she'd once moved through war zones. Her Marine training taught her cover. Never wave a flag in enemy territory. In real estate that meant no press, no LinkedIn flexing, just clean deals and ironclad contracts. Apex was a scalpel, slicing through bloated portfolios like the Callahans, who thought legacy meant a name on a building, not a foundation that lasted. Her phone buzzed. A text from her assistant, Theo. Tacoma permits hit a snag. City wants a follow-up. Call at 2 p.m. tomorrow? Nora typed back, said it. Send me bullet points, no fluff. Theo was her right hand, a former analyst who thrived on details and coffee. Together they'd turned Apex into a machine. Zoning experts, legal shields, and a network of investors who valued results over headlines. Nora's family thought she was showing Craigslist rentals to broke grad students. In reality, she was outbidding hedge funds in sealed deals. Her latest move, a block in Portland's Pearl District, snapped up before Soren could even spell gentrification. At the last family dinner, Marlo had dropped a bombshell, oblivious to its irony. Willow Grove's done for, she'd said, smirking over her wine. Some developers turning it into luxury lofts. Better start packing, Nora. Nora had smiled, her pulse steady. I'll figure it out. What Marlo didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Nora was the developer. Apex had bought the surrounding block 6 months ago, outmaneuvering 3 corporate sharks with a cash bid that left no trace. The lofts. A rumor she'd let spread to keep the vultures circling the wrong target. Nora wasn't demolishing Willow Grove. She was expanding it, planning 2 new units and a community garden, all while her family laughed at her failure. As she closed her laptop, Nora glanced at a framed photo on her shelf. Her Marine squad in Kandahar, dust-covered and grinning. She never made it home. That loss taught her what legacy really meant. Building something that outlives you, not something that screams your name. Her family's empire was a house of cards, propped up by fake contracts and offshore accounts. Nora's was concrete and rebar, built for people, not portfolios. But the real fight was coming. She knew the Callahans' dirty secrets, every misallocated dollar, every shell company, and she was ready to pull the thread that would unravel their world. All it would take was one meeting, one document, and the courage to step into the light. Nora Callahan's apartment at Willow Grove was quiet, save for the hum of a radiator and the distant laughter of kids chasing a soccer ball in the courtyard. The red brick complex, with its ivy-draped balconies, was her fortress, a place her family mocked as a crumbling relic but which she'd transformed into a haven for tenants who called it home. As she sipped coffee, her laptop screen glowed with Apex Holdings' latest coup. A controlling stake in Granite Tower, the Callahan family's flagship asset in downtown Portland. Nora, the Marine-turned-real estate strategist, had outbid corporate giants in a silent cash deal, her identity cloaked behind Apex's untraceable LLCs. While her father Gideon, sister Marlo, and cousin Soren toasted their own brilliance at the Lake Oswego estate, they were clueless that Nora held the keys to their crown jewel. But the real thrill? Watching them scramble to unmask the mystery buyer who'd slipped into their empire without a sound. Granite Tower loomed over Portland's skyline, its sleek glass facade etched with the Callahan name, a monument to their arrogance. For years, It had been their stage for boardroom theatrics, where Gideon signed deals that bled tenants dry, Marlowe spun PR lies, and Soren funneled profits into shady ventures. Nora had sat in those meetings as a teenager, grounded once for skipping one to climb Multnomah Falls. Now she owned 52% of the tower, acquired through Apex's shadow moves, cash deals, silent partners, no press. Her family didn't suspect her. How could they? To them she was the flannel-wearing renter who couldn't afford a lease, let alone a skyscraper. Back at Apex's headquarters, a converted warehouse with exposed brick and no receptionist, Nora reviewed the acquisition files with Theo, her assistant. "They're freaking out," Theo said, handing her a tablet. "Granite's board just scheduled an emergency meeting. Soren's blaming foreign investors. Marlowe wants to hire a PI." Nora smirked, her eyes scanning the screen. Let them chase ghosts. The Callahans were unraveling, their emails buzzing with panic. Soren's latest message to Gideon read, "Keystone came out of nowhere. No website, no trace. Who are these people?" Nora leaned back, her coffee mug warm in her hands. "They'll find out soon enough." The takeover had been surgical. Apex, through a front called Weatherford Group, had moved on Granite Tower 6 months ago, outbidding a Seattle hedge fund and a Dubai partnership. Nora's marine training, stay low, move fast, guided every step. She'd learned in Kandahar that real power doesn't announce itself. It strikes before the enemy knows you're there. While Marlowe bragged about her hotel deals and Soren posted vineyard selfies, Nora's team secured the tower's leases, audited its books, and flagged every dirty trick the Callahans had played. Fake maintenance contracts, offshore transfers, even a $200,000 consulting fee for a firm that existed only on paper. The evidence was piling up and Nora was ready to light the fuse. At the last family dinner, Soren had leaned across the table, his cologne stinging Nora's eyes. "Heard Granite's got a new player," he'd said, smirking. "Some shadow firm. Probably Russian. They're moving fast." Gideon, usually unshakable, had frowned. No one moves that quietly without a motive. Nora had stayed silent, slicing her steak, letting them spin their theories. Marlowe chimed in, "Maybe it's a front for a bigger fish. We should host a mixer, flush them out." Nora nearly laughed. A mixer? They thought they could charm their way out of checkmate. She'd sipped her water, her face a mask, knowing the shadow firm was sitting right in front of them. Back at Apex, Theo slid a folder across her desk. Granite's latest financials. They canceled HVAC repairs to boost cash flow. Tenants are furious. Nora flipped through the pages, her pen circling a line item. $1.2 million for a roof upgrade that never happened. "They're bleeding," she said. "And they don't even see the knife." The Callahans thought Granite Tower was their legacy, but Nora saw it for what it was. A hollow shell propped up by lies. She wasn't just taking it. She was about to turn it into something they'd never recognize, and the clock was ticking toward a reckoning they couldn't dodge. Nora Callahan leaned against the window of her Willow Grove apartment, the Portland skyline glinting in the distance where Granite Tower stood, its Callahan-etched glass mocking the family's fading grip. She'd spent years building Apex Holdings in the shadows, turning rundown properties into community anchors while her father Gideon, sister Marlowe, and cousin Soren squandered their wealth on fake deals and offshore accounts. Now, with a controlling stake in Granite Tower under her belt, Nora held a ticking bomb, an audit that would expose the Callahans' fraud in excruciating detail. Every fake invoice, every siphoned dollar, every lie they'd spun to prop up their legacy was documented, time-stamped, and ready to detonate. As she sipped her coffee, the weight of her secret felt like a loaded rifle, steady in her hands, ready to fire. The Callahans thought they were untouchable, but Nora was about to show them how fragile their empire really was. At Apex's headquarters, a no-frills warehouse with concrete floors and a view of the Willamette River, Nora spread the audit files across her desk. Theo, her assistant, handed her a binder thick with evidence. "This is it," he said, his voice low with anticipation. 6 years of their dirt, fake roof repairs, shell companies, Marlowe's $80,000 branding retreat in Tulum. Nora flipped through the pages, her marine-honed focus catching every detail. $1.2 million for a non-existent elevator upgrade, $300,000 funneled to a consultant tied to Soren's Napa vineyard, and Gideon's signature on a contract with a Delaware trust that led nowhere. They didn't just bend the rules, she said, her voice calm but sharp. They built their kingdom on quicksand. The audit was a masterpiece of precision, compiled with help from a forensic accounting team Nora had hired months ago. She'd started digging after Marlowe's smug comment at a family dinner about Willow Grove's imminent demolition. That night, Nora had cross-referenced Granite Tower's public filings and found cracks, discrepancies in maintenance budgets, payments to vendors with no licenses, and transfers to offshore accounts during board blackout periods. She'd spent nights tracing the money, her laptop glowing in Willow Grove's quiet courtyard while tenants slept. Now, every misstep was laid bare, each page a nail in the Callahan's coffin. Send it to legal, Nora told Theo. Full copies to Granite's board and their external auditors. No warnings. The Callahans were already rattled. At their last board meeting, intercepted emails showed Soren pacing the room, ranting about the Keystone buyer who'd snatched Granite Tower. They're ghosts, he'd written to Gideon. No press, no faces. Probably some offshore syndicate. Marlowe had chimed in, suggesting a PR campaign to spin the takeover as a partnership. Gideon, usually a statue of control, had replied with a single line. Find out who they are. Now. Nora read the exchange on her tablet, her lips twitching. They were chasing shadows while she held the spotlight ready to flip it on. Back at Willow Grove, Nora walked the courtyard, nodding to tenants like Mrs. Delgado, a retired nurse who grew tomatoes in paint cans. You keeping those kids out of my garden? Mrs. Delgado teased. Trying, Nora said, fixing a loose gate latch. The complex wasn't just her home. It was proof that buildings could serve people, not egos. She'd preserved its affordability, secured grants for upgrades, and kept it off her family's radar. But Granite Tower was different. A beast of glass and steel, bloated with Callahan greed. Nora's plan wasn't to destroy it but to gut its rot, and the audit was her scalpel. As she returned to her apartment, Theo texted, Granite's board just got the audit. Emergency meeting set for Monday. Malcolm's calling in lawyers. Nora set her phone down, her pulse steady. The Callahans thought they could talk their way out of anything. Press releases, handshakes, bribes disguised as bonuses. But this wasn't a negotiation. It was an execution, and Nora had the evidence to make it stick. She glanced at a photo of her Marine squad, their dusty grins a reminder of what she'd fought for, things that lasted, not things that shined. The boardroom was her next battlefield, and the Callahans were about to learn that their failure of a daughter had been playing chess while they played checkers. The Portland skyline shimmered under a gray dawn as Nora Callahan stepped out of her Jeep, her leather briefcase heavy with the weight of truth. Granite Tower loomed ahead, its glass facade reflecting the city's pulse, but inside the Callahan empire was cracking. Nora, the underestimated renter of Willow Grove, had spent years building Apex Holdings in secret, her marine discipline forging a real estate firm that outmaneuvered her family's greed. Now, with a controlling stake in Granite Tower and a damning audit exposing their fraud, she was ready to walk into their boardroom and rewrite their legacy. Her father Gideon, sister Marlowe, and cousin Soren thought they ruled the game, but Nora held the checkmate, a stack of documents that would strip their lies bare. As she adjusted her charcoal blazer, her heart beat steady, trained for battle. This wasn't just a meeting. It was the moment she'd been planning for years, and the air crackled with the promise of reckoning. The elevator to Granite Tower's top floor hummed, its mirrored walls reflecting Nora's calm resolve. She wore no jewelry, no flash, just a pressed shirt and low heels, her presence as unassuming as the Willow Grove courtyard where tenants grew herbs in old buckets. The receptionist glanced at her badge, did a double take at the authorized flash, and waved her through. The boardroom's glass doors opened to a scene of barely contained chaos. Gideon sat at the head, his jaw tight as steel. Marlowe flipped through papers she hadn't read, her manicured nails tapping nervously. Soren slouched, his smirk faltering, while Nora's mother, Lenore, clutched a string of pearls, her eyes darting like a cornered deer. They didn't see Nora as a threat, just a footnote in their story. That was about to change. Nora set her briefcase on the table, the click of its latches cutting through the room's tension. Who let you in? Soren snapped, his voice sharper than his tailored suit. Nora didn't flinch. She unzipped the briefcase and slid a stack of folders to the center, each one labeled with surgical precision. I'm Nora Callahan, she said, her voice clear as a bell. founder and managing director of Apex Holdings, the company that now owns controlling interest in Granite Tower. The room froze. Marlowe's hand stopped mid-flip. Soren's mouth opened, then shut. Gideon's pen froze on his notepad, his eyes narrowing as if recalculating a lifetime of assumptions. Lenore gasped, her pearls clicking softly. The silence was louder than any shout, and Nora let it linger, savoring the moment their world tilted. I acquired 52% of Granite Tower through private equity deals over the last 6 months, Nora continued, her tone even but unyielding. Fully legal, fully documented, fully final. She opened the first folder. And this is the audit. Pages fanned out. Fake invoices, offshore transfers, Marlowe's $80,000 Tulum retreat billed as branding, Soren's vineyard funded by a non-existent elevator upgrade, Gideon's Delaware trust with no paper trail. You've been stealing from this company for years, she said. Every dollar misallocated, every lie stamped with your signatures. It's all here. Soren shoved back from the table. This is insane, he barked. You're hijacking our meeting. Nora's eyes met his, unflinching. I didn't hijack anything. I bought it. Marlowe's voice trembled with rage. You, the renter? You're telling me you did this. Nora slid another folder forward. I built Apex while you were building lies. Willow Grove? I own it. The Pearl District block? My Granite Tower? Also mine. Gideon's voice cut through, low and bitter. You don't know what you're doing, Nora. She didn't blink. On the contrary, I know exactly what I'm doing. You betrayed this company long before I walked in. Lenore's voice cracked. Nora, this is your family. Nora's gaze softened, but only for a moment. I know. That's why I'm cleaning it up. He tapped the audit. You've got 2 choices. Cooperate with the auditors or I file this with the IRS and DOJ by Friday. The room went still, the weight of her words sinking in. Soren muttered something about lawyers, but it lacked conviction. Marlowe stared at the folders like they might bite. Gideon's silence was different. Not defeat, but recognition, as if he saw Nora for the first time. Nora closed her briefcase, the sound echoing like a gavel. She wasn't here to gloat. She was here to end a charade, and the Callahans were out of moves. But the real question lingered. Would they fight or would they fold? The answer was coming, and Nora was ready for either. The air in Granite Tower's boardroom still hummed with the aftershock of Nora Callahan's revelation. Folders of damning evidence lay scattered across the polished walnut table, each page a testament to the Callahan family's fraud, fake contracts, siphoned funds, and lies dressed up as legacy. Nora, the overlooked renter from Willow Grove, had just unmasked herself as the founder of Apex Holdings, the shadow firm that now controlled their flagship tower. Her father Gideon's jaw was tight, her sister Marlowe's eyes wide with disbelief, her cousin Soren's bravado crumbling, and her mother Lenore's pearls seemed to choke her silence. Nora's audit had stripped them bare, but she wasn't done. She wasn't here to burn their empire down. She was here to rebuild it, not for profit but for people. As she stood at the head of the table, her charcoal blazer a stark contrast to their designer suits, Nora was ready to rewrite Granite Tower's purpose, and the Callahans could either adapt or be left behind. Nora slid a final document forward, its embossed Apex Holdings seal glinting under the boardroom lights. This is the new operating agreement for Granite Tower, she said, her voice steady as a metronome. Effective immediately, this building becomes a community-focused trust. He paused, letting the words sink in. Floors 6 through 10 will offer rent-controlled housing. The lower levels will house small businesses, local, not chains, with capped rents. The mezzanine becomes a veteran resource center with job training, therapy, and outreach programs. She tapped the page. Funded by a VA grant I secured last month. Soren scoffed, his voice brittle. You're turning our tower into a charity? Nora's eyes locked on his. I'm turning it into something that lasts. Marlowe leaned forward, her voice sharp with panic. You can't just erase what this family built. Nora didn't flinch. I'm not erasing it. I'm fixing it. Your version of built was fake invoices and offshore accounts. Mine is homes people can afford, businesses that don't get priced out, and a place for veterans to rebuild. She flipped open the agreement, pointing to a clause. 60% of commercial rent goes to local tenants. A tenant board will have a say in operations. Annual profits will fund housing grants for veterans. Gideon's pen tapped once, then stopped. This building carries our name, he said, his tone flat but heavy. Nora met his gaze. It still does. But now it carries purpose too. Lenore's voice trembled. Nora, you're not qualified to run a foundation. Nora's response was calm, lethal. I already do. Apex has housed over 200 families, won 4 preservation awards, and operates with full transparency. You should try it sometime. She slid another page forward. No more private chef bills disguised as maintenance. No more 5-figure consulting fees to friends who don't deliver. No more construction bids to companies registered in beach towns. Marlowe's face flushed. You're destroying our legacy. Nora shook her head. You did that. I'm making it mean something. The room felt smaller, the glass walls closing in as the Callahans grappled with their new reality. Nora's vision for Granite Tower was everything they'd never imagined. Human, sustainable, rooted in the city's heartbeat. She'd spent years in Willow Grove, watching tenants like Mrs. Delgado plant tomatoes and veterans like Mr. Yates swap stories over coffee. That was the model she'd bring here. No rooftop cigar lounges, no luxury lofts, just spaces where people could thrive. She'd written the VA grant proposal herself late at night, fueled by black coffee and memories of her own struggle after the Marines. Broken heaters, endless VA waitlists, a system that forgot its own. Granite Tower wouldn't be that. Soren muttered. The board won't accept this. Nora's smile was faint but sharp. They already have. I met with them 2 weeks ago. They've seen the numbers. Most are relieved someone's finally doing it right. Gideon's silence was heavier now, not defiance but something closer to surrender. Nora closed the agreement, her hands steady. You can sign this and stay on as advisors with oversight, or I file the audit as a criminal referral by Friday. Your choice. The Callahans stared at the document, their empire reduced to a single signature. Nora didn't need their approval, she'd already won. But the real question hung in the air. Would they fight her or would they start to see what she'd built? The answer was closer than they thought, and Nora was ready to watch it unfold. The Portland dusk settled over Willow Grove, its courtyard alive with paper lanterns and the low hum of a Marvin Gaye playlist. Nora Callahan stood by a folding table, her flannel swapped for a simple sweater, watching tenants laugh over grilled burgers and sparklers. She'd just left Granite Tower's boardroom in pieces, her audit exposing the Callahan family's fraud, fake contracts, offshore accounts, and a legacy built on lies. As the founder of Apex Holdings, Nora had seized control of their flagship tower, turning it into a community hub for affordable housing and veterans. Her father Gideon, sister Marlowe, and cousin Soren had mocked her as a failure, but now they faced a choice: adapt or collapse. As Nora sipped lemonade, the weight of her victory felt less like triumph and more like a quiet promise kept. But the real test was coming. Could her family change or would they cling to their crumbling empire? 2 days after the Boardroom Showdown, Nora's phone buzzed in her Willow Grove apartment. She hesitated, then picked up. Nora, Gideon's voice came through, slow and stripped of its usual command. I was wrong about you. Silence hung between them, heavy as the audit folders she'd laid out. I've read your plan for Granite Tower, he continued. The trust, the tenant board, the veteran center. It's solid. I want to understand how you did it. Not as your father, but as someone who's got a lot to learn. Nora stood at her kitchen counter, steam curling from a chipped mug. Her shoulder ached, a reminder of her Marine days, but her heart was steady. You don't get to skip the hard part, she said. You'll sit in rooms where no one cares about your name. You'll listen, not lecture. Gideon exhaled. I can do that. She didn't say yes or no, just hung up, letting the moment settle. Days later, Nora leaned against the mezzanine railing at Granite Tower, watching an unlikely scene unfold. Gideon, in a rolled-up button-down, no tie or blazer, sat across from a tenant board member, a barista named Lila, who handed him a highlighter and a budget sheet. You've got 3 minutes, Lila said, no deference in her tone. Gideon nodded, asking about maintenance costs like a student, not a CEO. Nora's lips twitched. Her father, the man who'd once grounded her for skipping a board meeting, was learning to sit in the back. Theo, her assistant, joined her, smirking. Think he'll stick with it? Nora shrugged. We'll see. She'd added Gideon to the observer list. No voting rights, just access to reports. It was a start, not a guarantee. Back at Willow Grove's community party, the courtyard buzzed with life. Marlo, in a hoodie and sneakers, helped kids pipe icing onto cookies, her usual Fendi bag nowhere in sight. Soren strung lights with Mr. Yates, a Vietnam vet who'd lived there since '74, their laughter real for once. Even Lenore had stopped by earlier, dropping off canned goods for the pantry, her pearls swapped for a knit scarf. They weren't Callahans tonight, just people showing up without titles. Nora sat on a planter's edge, her mother joining her with 2 mugs of cocoa. "You didn't spike this, right?" Nora teased. Lenore smiled. "Just cinnamon." They sat in quiet, watching kids chase fireflies. "I never thought I'd see them here," Lenore said. Nora nodded. "They're not here as Callahans. That's the point." Lenore sipped her cocoa, her voice soft. "Why buildings, Nora?" Nora looked at the courtyard, lanterns swaying. "Because they stay. If you build them right, they hold memory, not ego." Lenore nodded, her eyes tracing the crowd. "I thought legacy was a name. You showed me it's showing up." Nora's chest warmed, not with forgiveness but with something close to peace. The party hummed on, a projector flickering with an old comedy, tenants trading stories. Gideon was still learning, Marlo was still trying, but Nora had already won. Not by shouting but by building. And as the lanterns glowed, she knew the real fight was keeping that light on, no matter who tried to dim it. Nora Callahan stood in Willow Grove's courtyard, the night air soft with the scent of grilled corn and jasmine from the community garden. The lanterns cast a warm glow, reflecting off the brick walls she'd fought to preserve. This wasn't just a complex. It was a promise, a place where families, veterans, and dreamers could root themselves without fear of being priced out. Nora had turned Granite Tower from a Callahan trophy into a beacon of purpose, and her family, once blind to her strength, was starting to see. Gideon's rolled-up sleeves, Marlo's cookie frosting hands, Lenore's quiet delivery of canned goods. They were small steps but real ones. Nora didn't need their applause. She'd built something unshakable, not for their approval, but for the tenants laughing under the stars, for the kids chasing sparklers, for the veterans who'd find a home in her vision. Legacy wasn't a name on a building. It was the lives that thrived inside it. Nora sipped her lemonade, her boots scuffing the pavement, and felt the weight of years lift. She'd outlasted their doubts, and that was enough. If Nora's story hit you in the gut, if you've ever been underestimated or built something in silence, drop a comment below. Share your story. I want to hear what you're fighting for. Hit that like button, share this with someone who needs a spark, and subscribe for more tales of quiet revenge and real legacy. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's next on this channel. Let's keep building one story at a time.